Okay.
Okay. So we're excited today to have Danielle Lee Powell with us. And she is, of course, speaking on the trauma that has come perhaps for some people with COVID. And the pandemic has disrupted and affected our social connections, work and family lives, daily routines, sense of security, and the overall predictability of the world around us. The ongoing chaos has made it difficult to fully honor and acknowledge our many losses. These are all preconditions of trauma. Join us as we begin a collective healing journey where we will share and discuss ways to grow together and heal while building a toolbox of small but meaningful coping skills to help us manage and navigate this challenging time. Danielle is currently a grief counselor and social worker at Legacy Hospice. So welcome, Danielle.
Hi, I appreciate the time to talk to you guys. So thank you for coming. I know that trauma feels like a really big word for us. So I wanted to just take the time to talk with everyone who's here about what trauma really is, so that we can recognize that collectively over the last 18 months, we have all been walking through some trauma. Even if you haven't personally been affected by the virus or lost someone, it's safe to say we all know someone who's affected by it. And then even further, we have all lost a lot of connections and human interaction, and things have changed a whole lot in the last year and a half, which is actually trauma. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the 6 preconditions so that we can make it into little bite-sized chunks so that we can recognize that truly, even though trauma is a really big, ugly word, we're all collectively walking through trauma together. And in order to heal that, we have to be able to acknowledge and recognize it. So the first thing that I will share, if you could go to the next slide, please. The actual definition of trauma is it's an emotional response to anything that exceeds our nervous system's ability to cope. So I know when we think about the word trauma, we think, oh gosh, that's really big. I've not been to war. I don't have PTSD. But trauma truly affects us mentally, physically, spiritually, in every possible way, with anything that is hard for us to cope with. So that could be something that you only feel for a few minutes or a few hours or a few days, or something much bigger that you carry with you for years. The feelings can be sharp and heavy and big and overwhelming, or they can be dull and kind of like a bruise. And if you don't poke it, it doesn't really bother you. So next slide. So recognizing the effects of trauma and how it shows up in our lives. So there's a emotional and physical connection that happens when our trauma part of our brain is activated. The frontal lobe, it's essentially knocked offline and it's flooded with stress hormones. And those stress hormones create a state of fight, flight, or freeze that our brain and bodies react to in an effort to keep us safe. So even though we may not know that we're not in any kind of grave physical danger, our mind is aware on some level that there's some crazy stuff going on around us and in the world that's affecting us. And that has the influx of the stress hormones that flood your brain and then act out in lots of ways, both emotional and physical. Next slide. So our mind and body connection creates the link for emotional and physical reactions. So some of those reactions, what they look like are anxiety, not sleeping well. And that could be not just having trouble falling asleep, but having trouble staying asleep. Some of us have found that throughout this last 18 months, we've got broken sleep. We're absolutely exhausted, but our minds are still working with our anxiety and everything that's going on. It creates a lack of concentration and muscle aches, fatigue and exhaustion, headaches, nausea, upset stomach. So all of that are physical reactions to the trauma that we're walking through. Have any of you noticed through this time any of these symptoms or anything else physically that's gone on with you personally or people that you love?
Danielle, I have a lot of people sharing with me that I talk to and come in contact with about poor sleep and fatigue and exhaustion. Those are probably the two biggest.
Yeah. And I think with the families that I'm working with, I've got a lot of the stomach stuff and headaches and not feeling like eating and not having an appetite. Or on the flip side, in my case, I cope by eating. So literally during the pandemic, I've gained 50 pounds. I'm not exaggerating. Between September and April, I gained 50 pounds, and that's just that I overeat to soothe myself. Elaine said her dad's been having headaches. Yeah, so it's emotional, these emotional responses that happen in our brain to what we're absorbing and walking through that we're not even aware of. It affects us physically, and we carry it with us, and that's hard.
I've definitely heard about both lack of sleep, having trouble sleeping from a lot of people, like Lisa, but also I've heard in talking with people a lot of anxiety and like new anxiety, people that maybe didn't really experience anxiety in the past, but they did sort of for the first time. And then the other thing I've seen a lot, and I feel like I myself have gone through phases of just feeling absolutely fatigued. Like I can't even say why. It's not like I did anything, but all of a sudden I'll just be like so fatigued and I'll just have to sleep,
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, yeah.
So that's a trauma response. And that's because our brains are in overdrive. We're flooded with the stress hormones and we're in a hyper aware state all the time. So that increases your blood pressure, it increases your heart rate, it makes you exhausted, even though you feel like you're not doing much, but you are, because your brain is constantly wondering what's next. So what we're going to talk about today are the preconditions. And I challenge you to kind of make notes as we go with what you feel like you've been affected by in the last 18 months, because I think you'll be surprised. I have found, I haven't run into anybody yet that I've talked with or worked with that hasn't met every single one of the 6 preconditions in some fashion. So I think it's important that we honor that and we recognize that and we give ourselves ways and time to heal. Because not only are we walking through this, everyone that we interact with every single day is walking through this with us. So it's a really strange time and it's a hard time and we're figuring it out as we go. And I think the biggest lesson I've had to learn is just to have grace. Give people grace. We don't know what else is on their plates. We know that we're in a global pandemic. We're coming out of it maybe, but it's hard and there's so much loss and so much grief. So the next slide, the first precondition is lack of predictability. So that leads to anxiety. It disrupts our ability to make good decisions, and our regular routines are thrown out the window. I mean, I can tell you that when this first started, I sent my kids to school on a Friday and they came home and we didn't know that they weren't going back. So, what do you do with your kids? All of a sudden, your kids are home. And then the stay at home orders, and those of us who work in healthcare, you're not staying home. You're still going to have to figure it out. And it's scary. And you've got patients that have the diagnosis and we don't know what it means yet. So lack of predictability. Who knows what's coming around the corner? We have no idea. And that creates anxiety. And that contributes to the fight, flight, or freeze and everything that's happening in our brains. So the next slide talks about what we can do with that lack of predictability, because we can't change it. We can't change the pandemic. We can't change the governor's orders. We can't change what's going on in the world, but we can create a schedule that we can stick to. And that looks different. But I found that when I was staying home in my pajamas, and kind of floating through the day, I was really lost. I had no direction, no purpose. I answered phone calls and talked to people, but I felt like I was lost in the world. I didn't know what day it was. So the goal when you're feeling that lack of predictability is to recognize and name the things that you can control. And for me, being a naturally distracted person by nature, that just looks like making a list of, okay, I'm still going to get up at 7. I'm still going to get dressed. I'm still going to attempt to look like a human that's functional. I'm not going to live in my pajamas. I started using a calendar, but make a routine so that you can create that predictability to make you feel a little bit safe. Does that make sense? So the next precondition, the next slide is immobility. So all of a sudden we're staying home. We're not going out, we're working from home, or we're not working at all. Our kids aren't going to school, they're not going to camps, they're not having friends over. We're doing all of our shopping online. We're missing weddings, births, funerals. Everything looks different and we're stuck. So that contributes to a state of trauma and your brain just not knowing what to do. So next slide talks about the remedy for immobility, as silly as it sounds, is to move. And I probably should have done more moving and I might not have these extra 50 pounds, but I know that now. Walking, dancing, yoga, fresh air, 10 minutes of anything that gets your heart rate up and gets you breathing fully and filling your lungs all the way up, helps rewire your brain to know that right now I'm safe. Right now I'm okay. Right now I'm gonna let myself have some of these good hormones in my brain and in my body to make me feel safe. Has anybody tried anything new as far as getting yourselves moving when you were at home more that was helpful?
So yeah, I I couldn't go to the gym, so I just found a bunch of free workouts on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to figure out like where in my house I was going to do that, you know. And at one point, our adult son was back from overseas, so that was a little tricky. But eventually, I kind of found my little space, my area, And I've tried to stay with that. It's gone up and down, but I've tried to, to do those early in the morning, do those workouts, but also walking, in the neighborhood.
Yeah. I think it's hard too because we're so exhausted from being overwhelmed that it's hard to make yourself get up and do anything.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that you can kind of incorporate into your new routine is that for 10 minutes in the morning, I'm going to do this yoga exercise or stretching. And then at lunchtime, I'm going to do some breathing and walking outside. And then at dinner time, something else. So that gives you something that you can incorporate into a new routine to help you feel like you've got some control. So that helps with the unpredictability and then also the immobility.
The biggest thing for me was I have a 16-year-old dog and didn't realize how much he needed me, so it's like every 2 hours I have to take him out. Otherwise, I've got messes in the house. So,
Right.
yeah, that's made a big difference. And for him too, we both use our stairs a lot. That's become more of a routine to just get him being active and, that kind of thing. But that
Yeah.
made me get outdoors because of him.
Right. And then too, as we've kind of switched back the last few months with things being a little bit more open and a little bit more normal, then that's a weird adjustment too, right? I have a dog who now has horrible separation anxiety because I was home with him for so long.
Right.
Yeah.
So he panics when it's time for me to come into work now because I didn't do that for almost a year.
Yep.
So it's interesting. So
My
the next slide talks about loss of connection. So we're naturally social human beings and we need connection with others. Not just people that we love and share our life with, but just interacting with humans. I think it's been really strange to see how different things were for so long while our faces were covered. Not seeing smiles, not being able to hold hands with somebody who's grieving or hurting or hug. Those are huge things that I feel like we took for granted and then they were taken away from us. So the loss of connection leads to depression. It contributes to us feeling like things are not okay. Just a hug and just holding hands for a few minutes and just connecting with another human in person does wonderful things for the chemicals in our brains and helps us know we're okay. So having that cut off is difficult and has contributed to this feeling of trauma. So the next slide talks about what we can do with that loss of connection. And that's where we've kind of had to find new ways. So I've become a fan of FaceTime. I've learned how to use Zoom and Microsoft meetings, and I am a very technologically challenged human. So that's been fun when my kids have patience and can help show me what mom should do. Virtual games with friends and family members. I have a lot of folks who they have a set schedule that every night at 9 they connect with people from all over the country that they know that are in different places, and they do like word games together for an hour or so. So that's a way to still have that connection. Our chaplain here does virtual family dinners every Thursday. So where Thursday night used to be their family dinner night and everyone came over to a home, they all have their iPads and sit around the table and have family dinner still, so they can still connect. It's different. And it feels strange at first, but it's still a way for you to see people that you love and interact and have that connection. And then also that's something else to put on your calendar and make part of a routine so that you have a schedule, so you feel like, okay, this is normal for now. I think we find safety in routines, and we feel like things are okay if they go according to plan. So with the pandemic, with so much being out of our control and crazy, any little thing that we can own and say, okay, this is what I'm doing, gives us that calming and soothing sense that this is okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the next slide is the fourth precondition is loss of sense of time and sequence. I cannot tell you how many times over the last 18 months, I'm like, what day is, I don't know what day it is. Like, I didn't know how to differentiate between the weekday and the weekend. What's the difference? And it brings to mind the movie Groundhog Day, where you're just repeating the same day over and over and over. The day runs together. I think another challenging thing with that, for those of us who were working remotely and from home, is that when's your cutoff? If you don't drive to work and you're working from the living room on your laptop and you're talking to people, like, when is the time when you say, okay, I'm going to be at home now? So I know a lot of people had some trouble initiating some boundaries with, if you're working from home and you never leave home, when are you not working? And what else is there to do? So it's been interesting. Have you guys found that?
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely. The boundary thing. The boundary thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, when do you cut it off? And I think that's especially true for those of us who are in caretaker roles or work in healthcare or are in the helping professions. We know that everyone's struggling, and we want to give and give and give and give, and don't really take the time to be mindful that we're actively depleting ourselves to the point of further exhaustion. Next slide talks about the remedies for the loss of time and sequence. Mindfulness practices. I can tell you that I never did a single mindfulness practice until the last 18 months. And it's been a miraculous thing to add into my life, and I will keep it in my new normal. Just because being present in the moment, not multitasking so much.
Right.
Being where I'm at, doing what I'm doing actively. When I go out to walk, I'm not going to take my phone and answer calls or read emails while I'm walking. Just walking the dog, being with Charlie, doing what you're doing without making it a whole bunch of check boxes that we have to check off. Breathing. Oh, Elaine said that she worked home for where'd it go? Come back.
She worked home for 7 weeks and had trouble getting my 8 hours in. It never felt like enough.
Yeah. And so that's the other thing. I think it's such a weird balance. When we come into work and when we leave home, we know that when we get to the office, we're going to grab our cup of coffee and go to our desk, and we have things that we do until 10, and then there's meetings, and then there's sessions, right? You know what's happening. And when you're at home, it felt like either you weren't getting much done or you were getting so much done, but it just didn't feel like it because you're doing it in your pajamas, in my case.
Right.
Yeah.
But, there are a couple of things that I had heard that I thought and certainly helped me too. I early on in the pandemic, I was working like my bedroom and my work room was like all the same. That was, when our son was here, we were just kind of limited for space. But then after he left and went back, somebody suggested that I turn that bedroom into my office. And I thought, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Right, I
And
remember when you did that.
yeah, remember when I did that? And
Yeah.
so from that point, I literally would like, close the door at, maybe 6 o'clock in the evening, close the door to that room and just try to leave it. I
Yeah.
mean, didn't always work because you still got your phone and everything, but,
Right.
sort of creating those spaces. And then with the mindfulness that you talked about, I know I also learned of several apps that you can put on your phone for
Mhm.
mindfulness. Maybe you have some too, Danielle, they're free
Yep.
and they're just really, really good.
They've really been helpful. The two that I started using that I love, one of them is called Calm.
Yep.
Then another one
Calm?
is called
Calm.
Calm, CALM.
Oh, okay, right. I know that one.
And then there's another one called Insight Timer.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that will actually give you, it lets you pick an intention for the day. So, for instance, today I decided my intention was I was going to be more patient. I seem to lack that lately. So every hour or so, it will remind me and give me random quotes about being patient and things that I can say, affirmations and mantras, and just little reminders to keep you in that space. So that's been helpful.
Yeah. I love
Connecting,
that. That's the one that I've used and I really like it a lot.
yeah, I do too. And then the other thing that I've really gotten excited about that's been really helpful is connecting with nature. And so my daughter, who's 16, makes fun of me and says that I'm some kind of a glitter hippie. I don't even know what that is, but whatever. So I really find that when I'm overwhelmed or stressed, if I go outside and take my shoes off and put my feet in the grass and connect to the ground, no matter what's going on, the ground is solid beneath me. And so that's a comforting kind of thing. And it tells your brain, okay, I'm safe. Even though I'm in the middle of a pandemic and the world is crazy and we have this collective trauma and everything else that's going on, the ground and the grass on my feet, I am okay.
I love that.
Yeah, it's silly, but I mean, my daughter makes fun of me, but it's been helpful. And just breathing, just taking a few minutes. One of the exercises that I do with my grief clients regularly is it's called 5-2-7 breathing. And it's really good when you're feeling anxious and you just want to slow things down. So you inhale through your nose for a count of 5 seconds, and then you hold it for 2. And then you exhale through your mouth like you're blowing through a straw for a count of 7. So if you do that at least 5 times, you don't have to count, but do count your inhalation seconds, count holding that breath, and count exhaling, and then do it again. Your heart rate slows down, your blood pressure comes down, those anxiety provoking hormones and chemicals in your brain, they start to calm. For whatever reason, that oxygen filling up your lungs and just concentrating on that breath reminds you that you're safe. It tells your body, even though your mind might be going in a million different directions, it tells your body and your brain that you're okay. You're filled with oxygen, you're slowing down your breathing, everything's fine. And that's a good way to reset. Some of our nurses here, when they're getting ready to go see a really difficult patient with complications that's hard, because we're humans, right? We're humans taking care of humans. So it's normal that things are upsetting even when you see it all the time. So our nurses, if they're going into a home and they know this is going to be difficult, before they get out of their car and go in, they'll do the 5-2-7 breathing practices. And it just helps. It helps ground you. It helps slow things down. It helps you center. And then you're not so anxious. So next slide talks about loss of safety. So we're very aware that we're living in a health crisis and a global pandemic. And regardless of our personal beliefs about it, we're all aware of the deaths, and we're all aware of the illnesses, and we're all aware of people grieving and losing loved ones, getting sick themselves and not knowing if they're going to be okay. All of that tells our brain that we are not okay. In addition to that, there's constant mixed messages from all directions between the media and politicians and medical communities, and then our friends and families and coworkers. Everybody's got their own theory about it. It's scary. Like, I don't know what's real, but I know I don't want it. And then on top of that, we don't know much about the vaccine. I mean, we're excited we have it, and that's great. We don't know what the long-term effects of it are going to be. We don't know what the long-term effects of the virus are either. So this is all a loss of safety. We don't feel safe in our bodies. We don't feel safe in our world because you don't know. So the next slide talks about the remedy to that. And it's just reminding yourself that you're okay. So activities that can comfort you, listening to music, doing art, writing. Our chaplain here bakes. We know when she's having a bad day because she'll come in the next day and there'll be cookies and cakes and brownies galore, because that's how she copes, is she bakes. Prayer, meditation, yoga. Here's one that's so silly, but my grieving widows swear by it: wearing soft and comfortable clothes. So, and I'm like, what does that do? But on my bad days, I've done it. I've worn softer things against my skin that are comfortable. I'm not wearing heels and trying to be cute. I'm just comfortable, and it helps. It's soothing. The same thing, like when we're younger and we have a favorite blanket, or you have a stuffed animal, a lovey, what my kids called them. It's something that soothes you, and that touch makes you feel safe. Heated and weighted blankets are a huge thing. I think when we're anxious, low lighting, kind of calming everything down, pumping the brakes, no loud noises, just kind of make your space calm and soothing and comfortable. Just take care of you. That's a big thing. When someone we love most in the world is struggling and not well, if they have a horrible flu, or they're just not well, you're not going to say, get up, suck it up, get better, keep it moving. Not at all. That's not what you do with someone you love. So the same should be true for us. So when we're struggling, when we're having a hard time, we need to self-soothe. Make yourself some hot tea, sit in a rocker, take time to heal and be and breathe. Like, these are not the times in trauma where you want to push and keep it moving. It doesn't do you any good. So then the next one is our loss of sense of meaning or purpose. So this is huge for women, especially those of us who are wives and moms and caretakers and professionals. Who are we when we aren't what we do? we really identify with what we do rather than who we are. So I think if we can't do the things we feel like we're called to do in the world, it makes us question our value and our purpose. And that's just not true. We're fabulous how we are. We're still fabulous no matter what's going on in the world. We just need to remember that and find new ways to express yourself and be you and do what it is you do. Has anybody noticed that as something that's come up with them in their life during this last 18 months where you were questioning, what am I doing? Or what am I supposed to do? Or who am I?
You know what, I think, Danielle, what affects that many times with this pandemic has been that there was such a loss of safety. And as mothers, we're so, we're just wired to want to protect our children. And it was so difficult at first because it was like you said in previous screens, there was so much information and it many times, you would watch the TV in the morning and you'd get one message and you'd watch it in the evening and you get a totally different contradicting message. And so it was so scary because as moms, and even for grown children, like yours and mine, Danielle, even though they may not be in the home, we still, are concerned about their safety. You don't ever lose that. You don't ever, that never leaves you as a mom. And I think that this is right, that, as moms, that is our role in the world, our probably first and foremost over everything else. And that's been the hardest to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. My son was at JMU for his freshman year, and I got a call that security had picked him up and taken him to a hotel to put him in isolation because he had been exposed to someone at some point. So he spent 10 days in a hotel room and we weren't allowed to go. I don't know what JMU did. I guess they got this hotel that was for their kids that they needed to quarantine.
Wow.
That could be positive, but they didn't know yet, because then if you tested positive, they moved you to the sick dorm. But as a mom, I immediately want to go get him. But, I want my kid.
Right.
I don't care if he's 19. He's mine.
Oh my gosh. That's such a worry.
And
that's
then
scary.
You have to kind of figure out, well, how can I still be a mom and do mom things so that he feels mom comfort at a distance? And that's where you have to get creative, but it's hard. It's so hard. So then he didn't test positive. He did his 10 days, went back to his dorm, and then 2 weeks later came down sick and got moved to the sick dorm. He was positive. And then his roommate was sent out 911 to the hospital. And it's just these kids, they're babies. I know they call themselves adults, but they're not. But it's been a challenge. So, just as a mom, trying to figure out how I can still love him through it. Even though I can't hold him and make him his hot tea and rub his head. So
Right.
that's been a challenge. So the remedy for our loss of sense of meaning is to connect with other human beings. And even though we couldn't at the time hug people or see people or be with people, I think virtually it's helpful to see faces. I was so excited the first Zoom call that I was able to make because I could see a whole face. It wasn't a mask.
Right.
I was like, I can see you. It was so exciting. And then writing letters for those folks who can't figure out this tech stuff. or don't have the teenagers to fuss at you while you're trying to figure it out. Write letters, write a journal, like get your feelings out and give oxygen to what you can, and rather than keeping it all bottled up, because it will make you sick. It will make you physically sick when you walk around in a trauma state for so long and you don't take time to heal and breathe and be. So love, give and receive love and get creative about it. And that's just what it is. I had to figure out a way to love Darian at a distance and send him care packages and goodies and silly notes and emails and FaceTime. And what do you do? Still serve. So find new ways to honor who you are and your gifts and your purpose. You just have to get creative about it. You have to figure out new ways that you can still be you and still do what it is that you do that makes you feel good, because not only is that helping your community heal and feel love, it's helping you heal as you walk through it. So those were the 6 preconditions. Who feels like they had them all?
Probably at some point, right?
Yeah.
I think all of us probably, maybe even unknowingly, had many of them and just didn't realize it.
Right. And so
Yeah.
When I started, I said the word trauma, and it's like, that's a big word. And you're like, I'm not going through trauma.
Right.
But when you break it down, that these 6 things are what make trauma happen in our body, in our brain, and then it spills over into everything. At some point in the last 18 months, we've all had some combination of all of these, and it's trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So the next slide talks about healthy perspectives on emotions. So the hard part is when we're talking about all of these feelings and all of these emotions, and we want to say they're good or they're bad or whatever. So the important thing to recognize and to fully acknowledge is that emotions are neutral. They're not good, they're not bad, they're not right, they're not wrong. They just are. The fun thing about being a human is our emotions are always in flux, always. You can start the day and feel joyful, and then something silly happens and you spill your coffee everywhere and then you're aggravated. But then you look outside and the sun is out. Oh, it's a pretty day while you're cleaning up the coffee, right? Mm-hmm. So we're always in flux. The other thing to remember is that even with those feelings that we might label as not so great, they can coexist with all the good stuff. So even though we're in the middle of a pandemic and we've walked through all of these horrors and all of this crazy stuff, we've still had moments of joy. We've still had friends who had babies and friends who got married, and you've still enjoyed moments of laughter, and you've still shared special memories with the people that you love. So even in the midst of the trauma, joy and peace and happiness coexist there. It's just a matter of riding out those emotions that don't feel great, because in a few minutes you're going to have a new one.
Danielle, I really like that emotions are not facts. I really love that, because I think, emotions are not facts, and thoughts that we have in our brains are not necessarily truth. And I think, sometimes when, I think the pandemic is a perfect example. Your brain can go to such crazy places, right? Like, oh, what if so-and-so got sick? Or, what if my child got sick and then, they got really sick and then they went to the hospital and then they couldn't breathe. And so it kind of comes back to that, I think the mindfulness and where that can really come and help and play a part, because at that point, just sort of thinking, okay, this is my brain kind of running away with me. These
Yeah.
thoughts right now, this is not the truth. This is not
Right.
happening now. And you can kind of come back and say, here in this moment, you know, this, he's not sick, he's
Right.
okay, you know, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that the other thing that there seems to be some power in is if you can name the emotion, whatever it is. If you can name it, if you can say, okay, right now I'm anxious, I have anxiety, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. Well, just saying that that's what it is takes some of the weight away from it. I think when we get that tangled up ball of emotions, when there's so much going on, the easiest way to kind of ground and center is to pick your top two. So right now in this moment, I'm having anxiety, but I'm also feeling resilient. So naming what it is and then moving past it or sitting with it. I mean, if it's a hard and heavy emotion, that's okay. Feel it, name it, acknowledge it, but recognize that in 10 minutes, something else could happen and it's okay. So the next slide is helpful coping statements. Because just like anything that is new to us, like exercise, you have to practice it before it becomes something that you automatically do. So it's just like when you start doing sit-ups, you'll start with 5 and then you'll add a little bit more and a little bit more, and it gets easier as you go. So some helpful coping statements just so that you can say to yourself, this is feeling uncomfortable, but this is normal. I think that's one thing that people really struggle with grief, is it feels gross, it feels messy, they feel like they're losing their minds, and that's normal grief, and that's gross. But it's okay. I don't need to focus on this feeling or try to figure it out or change it. Nope, not at all. You can name it and you can keep it moving. You can choose to distract yourself. So you can go outside like I do and put your feet in the grass and hug a tree. The feeling is not the boss of you. You're in control. And that's hard to remember, but it's true. One thing I think that's been helpful for my folks who are struggling with depression and anxiety is to be able to name every day 3 things that they're grateful for. Mm-hmm. And as I work with people who are grieving death and loss, it's hard to find something to be grateful for every day. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it might be that we're grateful that our pillow is soft, and that's okay. That's something. Just acknowledge those 3 things, no matter how small. If you can think of 3 things that you can be grateful for and you can find joy and gratitude in, it helps your brain to rewire and come back around to safety and security, and you're okay. This feeling that you're feeling is a helpful reminder to slow down and breathe. That's a good one. I think the bigger an emotion, the more we need to listen to it. And 9 times out of 10, it's that we need to pump the brakes. Mm-hmm. Breathe. I allow this feeling to be here, and I know that it will soon pass. And that's just so true, because we're always, 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 as humans, in a million different directions. So the next slide is about self-care. So in order to know how the trauma is affecting you, you need to check in with yourself. You need to be really honest with yourself and check in. Are you eating 3 healthy meals a day and staying hydrated? Yes or no? Okay. If you're not, that's something you need to work on. That's part of your care plan, right? Do something. Are you doing something to relax for 10 minutes at least 3 times a day? Either you are or you aren't. And if you're having a hard time, it might be time to incorporate that into your plan. Are you keeping your mind stimulated? That's a big one. I find that when we're overwhelmed, it's hard to focus. So if you could just sit down for 5 minutes and read something really short and just really be with it. Sometimes it's a meditation or a devotion, things like that give you comfort and give you peace and help you center. Are you exercising at least 3 days a week? I can tell you absolutely not. I am not. I am working on it. But that's part of taking care of you. Are you keeping your obligations and appointments? I think that's a way to kind of gauge where we are with our depression and anxiety, because when you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not likely to want to leave the house or keep up with your virtual happy hour with your friends. So that's a good way to check in. Do you sleep at least 6 to 8 hours each night? That's hard, but that's part of your wellness and taking care of you. And then the biggest one is, are you kind to yourself? And that one's hard for women, especially because we are our biggest critics and we are the doers and the fixers and the everythings for everybody. And we don't often put ourselves on the list of what needs to be taken care of. And we should be at the top because we have nothing to give if we don't love ourselves and nurture ourselves and soothe ourselves and take care of ourselves, whatever that looks like for you.
Danielle, I think a lot of us who are caregivers, right, in whatever role that may be, I think we don't understand that right there, that we can't care for others if we're not taken care of. If we're sick or if we're depressed or if we have anxiety, we're not able to care for those around us that we're so worried about. That's causing the anxiety, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I think it's a good, and just check in with you.
Mm-hmm.
Check in with you and be really honest, because it's just between you and yourself, but you're with you all the time. You don't get a break from Lisa, and I don't get a break from Danielle.
Right.
We're the only people that we have with us all the time with no break. We're it. So we should take care of ourselves and be kind to ourselves and give ourselves the same space to heal, the same space to breathe as we would someone we love most in the world. And that's the only way that we can care for others and we can support others and we can love them through it, as if we're giving ourselves that same grace.
And you had mentioned journaling, Danielle, and that's just a great way when you talk about what you're grateful for, like how I feel today goes on in one column, so you can identify that and name it. And then on the other is what I'm thankful for or what I'm grateful for today, and that sometimes that's hard for women to do, but I know a lot of women find that very helpful to journal that way, so that makes it a little bit easier than trying to mentally think about that and put that into words. If you're writing it down,
you do a great job with that on your Facebook page, all your beautiful nature photographs, and you're always saying that how grateful you are, and that lifts my day.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's hard to say the things that we need to get out. And it's hard because we might feel judged by things that we're struggling with. So if you don't have a person that you can share that stuff with or give oxygen to, have a journal and dump your brain out every day at the end of the day. Get it out.
Yeah. You'll sleep better. You'll sleep a whole lot better. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And then, so I do a brain dump in the evening, like with all of my stuff. In the mornings, I set an intention. I kind of make some goals of personal things, right? And then at the end of the day, I can check in and see how I did. But for me, that's a way for me to be accountable to me, that I'm not running away with the day, because I'm a scattered human. I need to focus. Yeah. But I hope that you guys will take the time to honor your healing and recognize what you've walked through and what everyone we share this world with is walking through, and give each other, and especially yourselves, grace, and love yourself through it, and breathe. Because you're doing it, even though it's gross and it's been hard, here we are.
Right.
We're doing it.
Right.
But
And
thank you.
I think a word that Danielle always uses, I do other things with Danielle, and the word that she uses a lot is intentional. And I think that is huge when it comes to self-care, is that we have to be very intentional about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Danielle,
Absolutely.
this was just
It's
really
awesome.
awesome presentation. I mean, it's so practical. I love how you broke it down. Like you said, that word trauma seems overwhelming, but or big or like unrelatable. But then when you broke it down into those different aspects, it really does ring true. And I also loved how for each one you gave some real concrete, tangible things that we can do to address that, to help that.
Yeah,
I think
can't.
it's
Go ahead.
important that we build a toolbox of how we can love ourselves through these things. And we've kind of had to learn as we go, because I've never been in a pandemic. I think any of us have.
Right.
I'm looking forward to the recording, and I want to send it to my daughter, who's 30 and 32, and was the first grade teacher throughout this year.
Oh, wow.
And it was major tough, and she's also switching into a new role next year and doing classes, and it's just crazy. She'll learn a lot from this. I know I sure did. So thank you so much.
Good. I'm so glad. Well, it was so nice to talk with you guys. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. And I think thanks for letting us record this, Danielle, because I think, a lot of people are away, but we can put this up on the website, and we'll be able to have your presentation reach a lot more people that way as well. And it just really helpful. Elaine said in the chat, thank you as well.
Thank you, guys. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and your week, and take care of yourselves. And breathe. Okay.
Breathe.
So nice.
Thank you, Danielle.
Bye, friends.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.